A Cup of Gratitude with Amanda Schaefer. Hi, I'm your host, and I'm so glad you stopped by. This podcast is really for anyone, anywhere, anytime. And it's about taking a moment to slow down and look around and actually see all of the good things that are there. There's no question that asks, is your cup half empty or half full? But I think a better question is, what's in your cup? I mean, a drop of gratitude will benefit your life unimaginably more than a full cup of anything else. So let's settle in and take a look at how we can shift our focus and embrace the joy and the wonder of the life that we have. And once you start, you won't be able to stop seeing the good. And just like me, you won't be able to stop talking about it. And somehow that creates even more. Even in the midst of difficulty, even when it's really hard. Learn how to drink from a cup of gratitude.
Welcome. Today, I'm speaking with Leann Faint. Coming from a broken family herself, Leann inherently understands the struggles of the students she works with. Called to teaching, Leann began her career as an English teacher in mainstream high school in a low socioeconomic area. Whilst raising her 3 children, Leann moved into special education, a field that she quickly became passionate about. And this led her to studying her master's in special education and then gaining her role of head of special education. This role prepared her for working with complex youth, families, and outside agencies. And in early 2018, Leann felt led to apply for a position at Carinity Education Southside after 20 years in the public sector. For the past 5 years, she has strongly felt both the burden and the privilege of being caretaker of the extraordinary young women who are students at Southside. And during this time, Leann has completed further study in trauma-aware education at the postgraduate level. Leann is pleased to share her experiences with you all today, and she's coming from Australia, so I am up very early and she is up very late so that we can share with you. Good morning and good evening, Leann. How are you?
Hi, Amanda. I'm really well. Thank you so much for having me.
I'm really excited to share your story. I just think it's beautiful when we get to go back and see what God was doing all along, and yours is one of those kinds of stories.
Most definitely. You can never imagine what God has planned for you.
You can't. He writes the best stories, you know. And I don't know why everyone doesn't share their story, because I really do think that, especially in the practice of going all the way back to the beginning, which we don't do that often in our everyday life, that we see some things we might have missed, find some little treasures along the way, and get kind of encouraged ourselves by what God has done just for us, let alone others.
Yeah, most definitely. He plans every single step, and it's only when you look back that you actually realize how we are just sitting in the palm of his hand the whole time.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, as most people who listen know, I like to do things a little differently and start at the very beginning so we can see his goodness weaving in and out of our lives. No matter what we're doing, he always remains the same. Would you tell us a bit about your childhood?
Sure. So I was born in the 70s, born in Brisbane, Australia, which is in the state of Queensland. I'm the second of 4 girls. My dad was an engineer, and my mum was a stay-at-home mum, was a legal secretary prior to that. And we just had a normal, very middle-class upbringing. And around about the time that I was 9, so my older sister was 11, and then I had 2 younger ones who were 5 and 4. Mm-hmm. And it all sort of happened around a similar time. My father became a Christian, and my parents' marriage broke down. So we were taken away by mum to live in Cairns, which is 1,600 kilometres away.
Wow.
Yeah, so a very long way away. Both mum and dad were originally from Cairns, so they had family up there, and we used to, when we were a nuclear family, we used to travel yearly up that way to see family. So we were taken up that way by Mum. And that was a very difficult time, I think, for everyone, but particularly for my dad, because he did fight for custody for us. And as many people would know, in the 70s, it very rarely went in the favour of the father.
Yeah.
So
it still doesn't. It's
that's correct.
It's astonishing to me to see in so many cases, even when the mom isn't really the best of the two parents and can't show stability in some other things, they do tend to always put the kids with the mother.
Yeah. And in hindsight, God did have the best plan, and would a professional man in the 70s be able to look after 4 girls if he had custody of us? That would have been very difficult in itself. So we moved to Cairns and went from living a very middle class life to also being, a single parent who cleaned houses and drove a taxi cab to keep food on the table. So we never had much when we were growing up.
Was it difficult for you being separated from your dad? That's a really long distance.
Yeah, and it was. I think as kids you're fairly resilient, particularly if you've been brought up in a loving family. You're fairly resilient. We all made friends fairly easily. I think it's more as you get older, the true impact of that on your parents, on yourself, on your siblings, really shows more as you become an adult. But I know Mum is a very difficult person, can still be a very difficult person, can be very bitter. And when she left my father, there was lots of other relationships, which is not what you really want when you've got 4 little girls in a house. So, and God kept us very protected from that, thank goodness. Yeah. But it still wasn't a lovely environment to be brought up in.
Must have been confusing. It sounds confusing.
Yeah, I think confusing is probably a good word, and you just become I think fiercely independent to try survive it. So I think that's the only way to describe it, is you survive it as best you can.
Even during our pre-recording call, we talked about how damaging divorce can be. How did your dad find a way to stay connected with you and your sisters?
So apart from regular phone calls, and back then phone calls cost a lot of money, but airplane flights cost a lot of money. So he would come up generally once a year and spend a few weeks in the Christmas holidays. He'd stay at his brother's house, and we'd go over and visit him. And then usually once a year he would fly one of us down to spend some time down there with him. It was always too much to fly us all down. I think maybe once or twice he drove up and then drove us all back down, which I can't imagine what that would have been. And the fighting in the car, I just
I can kind of picture it. So let me ask you this. This is something we didn't talk about in the pre-recording call, but it's just occurring to me. What kind of changes did you see in your dad, even though you didn't see him as much, after he became a Christian?
He just had that real focus on God. He had a more of a lovely softness to him, and the Lord was very important, and he would always bring things back around. There would always be a Bible lying around, but I always felt there was like a deep sadness. Not having his kids there.
Yeah, I'm sure. I mean, in so many instances in people's lives, choosing Jesus means you lose something else.
Mm.
But God is good. God is good. And so, in retrospect, when we look at your whole story, he didn't lose a thing.
No,
Yeah.
that's right.
Yeah.
And like Job, he got back
Yeah.
with more.
Yeah. Yeah. That's beautiful. So you left Brisbane when you were 9 years old, and that you told me during your pre-recording call that you had this friend, and I believe her name was Belinda, who was a Christian, and y'all wrote letters to each other, like real letters, constantly back and forth. How did her friendship sustain you while you were away?
I think it was, I guess, like an anchor, really. I mean, because we met in grade 1, Belinda and I, so we were 5 years old, and lived only a couple of streets away from each other, and just this beautiful Christian family. There were 6 kids, and mum and dad, and just that sort of, and she was like any young person, young child, is not perfect, and we probably discussed some very naughty things in our letters, but the whole time that foundation of Christianity was there and apparent in her life. And so we used to write sometimes a couple of times a week, and we were just prolific letter writers, which a lot of young people today wouldn't understand. And draw silly pictures and write little messages to the postman on the envelope and that sort of stuff. And and it was a lot of fun, and we just loved it. And whenever I was in Brisbane, then I would definitely see her, give her a call and that sort of stuff. So it was just a friendship that really should have just ended, but did not, and it got stronger. And so
you two were intentional about it.
Yeah, very much so. Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it was it still is to this day a beautiful friendship. Yeah.
Yeah, that's amazing. I love when I hear people's stories, how God puts Christians in your life. And I believe it's always in hindsight that we realize how they affected us. I mean, that's a steadfast friendship. That's not something everyone would do. She's not the one that moved, yet she really loved you. And you look back on these memories, and I'm sure she does too, with fondness. And that love is just so apparent. It's just, I love that you called it like an anchor.
Yeah, it was an anchor to Brisbane. It was that. I love Francine Rivers' books, and she writes
me too.
The Scarlet Thread of Redemption, and just that thread that tied us together all those years.
Yeah, that's lovely. Now, when you went to university, you ended up moving back. Can you tell us what happened during that time?
So during that time, I moved back, and that was actually the start of when all 4 of us girls finished high school. We all moved back to Brisbane. So Dad got us back as adults, which was lovely. So during that time, I think I was like typical first and second year at uni, where you go a little bit wild and all of that. So I had a partner at that time who obviously was not a Christian, but I really reconnected with my friend Belinda during that time. And at that time, her oldest brother, was pastor of a small church. And so just by going to Bible studies with them during the week, I initially gave my heart to the Lord at that point. So I think I was in my second, maybe third year of university when that happened. Unfortunately, at the time, though, I had a partner, and that didn't go with his sort of plans. So having this little Christian girlfriend. So within a matter of weeks, maybe months, that I fell away from the Lord. Down the track, I I really eventually saw his true colours and broke it off with him.
Yeah.
But
You
it
actually,
was that.
you actually
Sorry.
told me that you remembered, because I have this written down, pushing God away.
Oh, yeah. So I was about to get to that.
Oh, sorry.
No, you're right. So then I was single,
Yeah.
and still not walking with the Lord, and and the Lord was on my case. So he was trying to get me back, and that's how this whole time as well. Belinda was just gently, when you're ready to come back to church and that sort of stuff. Just being there, and
Yeah.
and so I just remember I really was a little bit wild, and and I would just have a very wild night, and the next morning I would I would taunt God and say, do you still love me? Yeah, and every time, yes, I do.
Yeah.
And
Isn't
and you can only do that for so long.
Yeah.
For anyone who's listening, I don't recommend it. He wins in the end, just is the end of the story. You've got to give in, because he is good. He is greater. He is wonderful. So keep pushing, and I just remember one night, and I was getting exhausted.
I'm sure.
Spiritually, getting spiritually exhausted. And I just remember going out one night, and I was having a drink, and I thought, at the end of that glass, I thought, well, that's it. I just decided. I thought, I'm stopping now. I'm not going to run anymore. I'm not running anymore. And I went home, and that was it. And I can't remember the exact course of events. It's many years ago now, but I called Belinda and I went back to church, and I counted the cost of what it meant to be a Christian, and committed to it, and have been committed to that ever since.
Well, as you're describing your story, literally taunting and testing God. Well, do you still love me now? And I heard you tear up, because his answer is always yes. And there's not a thing that we can do or not do that is going to keep God from loving us fiercely. And I don't think we understand that till we understand that.
No, we don't get it until we get it. Nothing can separate you from the love of God.
And it's just such an amazing thing. I love that you also said that Belinda was just gently checking in with you. She didn't force you, but she was there for you. And that's our job in a friend's life who maybe doesn't know the Lord yet, is just to continue to occasionally, remind them that, hey, you're welcome here. Stay their friend, but not be hitting them over the head with what they should or shouldn't do.
No, non-judgmental. Just I'm here.
Yeah.
We're here. The church is praying for you.
Yeah.
And that's what they said to me. We've been praying for you nonstop since you left.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. So let me ask you, Leann. So once you felt like you had fully submitted to God and you weren't running anymore, do you remember how your life changed?
Apart from that indescribable peace, things just fall into place a lot more naturally. I finished my degree. Throughout my degree was like, is this what I want to do? And in the fourth year of uni, which is when I had come back to the Lord, it was like, this is what I want to do. I want to be a teacher. This is who I am. So, and in the meantime, I'm not sure if we talked about this previously, but I started doing some short-term mission treks with people from our church over to the Philippines. So started doing that, and then in the process of just being a Christian in my little church, there was no single men there. Happened to meet my husband, so I knew his brother and his brother's wife. I'd known them for a couple of years, and I had never met my husband.
Mm-hmm.
And then he became a Christian, and they brought him along to an event at church, and that's where I met him. So
Wow.
in our little church.
Yeah.
So it was lovely. Mm.
It is. It is. Again, God writes the best stories, right? That doesn't sound like what would happen. It's a tiny little church. How, there are no single people. How are you going to meet someone? But yet God aligns in his timing the next chapter. That's really cool.
Mm. Yeah,
You also had mentioned to me that in that church, you felt that the women there really took you under their wing, and they really poured into you. And I think that's such an important thing.
Yeah, most definitely, because I don't feel I had the best example growing up.
Mm-hmm.
And so just having, beautiful Christian women who were a couple of years older than me, already married, some of them starting to have children. And they just took this this young person who really probably didn't have the best social skills, probably didn't have the best manners, any of those things, and just lovingly took me under their wing, and I joined in with things and joined in with their families with things, and just saw a new pattern for how things would be done. And hopefully I've done the best to raise my own family according to that pattern, and not the dysfunctional pattern that I was raised in.
Yeah, don't we all hope we've done a better job?
Yeah. That's the goal.
And again, here's God putting these people very strategically in your life who can fill in. That's what I see in so many of the stories. The places where, our families are broken or the missing pieces, he fills it in with the body of Christ.
Mm.
The things that we didn't receive in our nuclear families, we receive in his family.
Yeah, that's right. And that's why he uses the term family. These are your brothers and sisters. So
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Now you all have 3 children together. What are your kids like?
They're awesome, of course. So my eldest, my son Eli, he is 23. He actually moved out of home yesterday to go live with his cousin, which is very exciting. He's just come back from 2 weeks in Canada, actually skiing. So he is in the last 6 months of his law and finance degree. So he's working in a law firm. He's got a lovely Christian girlfriend, and so life's going really well for him. He's a lovely young man. So my second child was a little girl, Lily, and she is my more sort of shy child. She has a wicked sense of humour, but she's incredibly bright. She has not continued with university at the moment, and that's okay. And for me, I've had to get my head around that. And she's also not currently walking with the Lord. So, but I look what Jesus did in my life. I just need to trust him with her life. And we have been very deliberate. Ben, my husband, and I have been very deliberate in making her always feel loved, because if anything goes wrong in her relationship, she needs to know that she can come back home.
That's right. That's right.
So she needs to know that. And then my third child, also a girl, Grace, she has just graduated from high school. She is a drama queen of the truest sense. She is a beautiful singer and actress, and this year is doing a Bachelor of Acting at Griffith University. So, and that's her passion. So that's her passion. Yeah. And she's very good at what she does.
That's a very diverse group, and they all sound amazing. I love your both your Christian heart and your mother heart of when describing the daughter who currently isn't walking with the Lord, that you love her just as much, and you do everything you can to make sure that she knows that she's safe and welcome no matter what. And that is literally how God loves us, right?
That's right.
It's how you were loved by your friend Belinda. And so it's wonderful to see the overflow of that. And also for you to know, hey, God's working. And, what worked in your life was people not pushing you.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And just being non-judgmental.
Yes, yes.
And you see families who close the door on their kids because they're not walking, and it's heartbreaking.
It is.
Yeah.
I don't understand. I don't understand it. Nowhere in the Bible does it tell you to do that. Nowhere.
No.
As a matter of fact, in Titus, which is not a book that most people read, but it's very small, only 3 chapters, I think. But in Titus, there's this section where it basically says, like, hey, don't expect the people that don't know Christ to be anything different, and gives all these kind of difficult examples. And then it finishes with, because that's what you were like. Like, we're supposed to have love, we're supposed to have compassion, and we're supposed to also understand, like, we were like that too. We didn't know any different. And so how are we supposed to treat others who don't yet know Jesus? Yeah. Well, good for you.
And he loved us yet while we were sinners.
That's absolutely right. That's absolutely right. And we're supposed to be reflecting his image and his love. It's agape love. It's a sacrificial, selfless, unconditional love.
That's exactly right.
Yeah. Now, after you graduated from university, you were a substitute teacher. What grades did you teach? What was your subject matter?
So taught years 7 to 12. So we're a little bit different to America. We don't tend to have that middle school. We have the primary school and then the secondary school. So years 7 to 12, taught lots of different subjects, but my subjects was senior English and history. And I did lots of contracts. I mainly worked in one particular school because once they realise that you're reliable and you can do your job, you get lots and lots more contracts.
Right.
And so it was at that time that I got asked to do a 6-month contract in special ed, and it kind of freaked me out a little bit, thinking, I don't know how I'd go with that. And I was actually had just fallen pregnant with my first child.
Oh wow.
So I did do that 6 months contract, and I realised that this is actually where I'm meant to be. This is where I want to be. I always loved English teaching, but something was always just a little bit amiss. And in special ed, I was like, wow, this is my place. Yeah. So over the next few years, as I had my children, I did ongoing contracts in and out of special ed. And after my second was born, I managed to be made permanent in the special ed department. So, went on to have my third, and I was permanent by that stage.
Right. Now, how did you know? What was it about working with disabled children that you realized that this is what I'm meant to do?
I had that real peace, but I do find it hard to put my finger on what it is. I wouldn't consider myself the most patient person, but when I'm in even my current job, when I'm was back in special ed, you just find this deeper well of patience, and I realised I found it quite easy to explain a concept 5 different ways, for these little or show them things in a concrete manner and that sort of things, and it just came very naturally to me. Yeah.
Yeah, I can hear that. And I know that was a big question. But I remember when I used to work with the elderly, I did it for 16 years. And I had that same thing. I could kind of slow down to their pace. I
Mm,
could just automatically be more gentle, more patient, more
mm,
kind. I took the time to listen well, all things that maybe the hustle and bustle of everyday life doesn't really allow you to do. And didn't really seem like my personality 100%, but I knew, I was like, oh wow, I'm really meant to do this. And now all these years later, I did stop for a while, and ended up then working with caring for some children, which felt like I was getting a raise because or a promotion, because older folks are very sometimes crusty and set in their ways. They're very different, and little kids are so carefree and moldable and open, um, to new concepts. But I've got to say, I didn't really ever see myself doing either of those. That's not what I went to school for. I went to
mm,
university for dramatic writing, acting and film, and kind of using those things now. But here I am also all these years later, living with and caring for my parents in their last years. So, God uses everything. And I believe that he taught me some things while I was doing caregiving for others in that long season. He taught me things I'm using now.
mm.
And I
Yeah.
feel like in your story, working in that avenue also prepared you for what you're doing now.
Oh, most definitely. It set all the groundwork for where I am now.
Yeah.
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 Not just working with the students, but um, that particular location with the staff,
Hmm.
the parents, all of it
Yeah.
just prepared me
Yeah.
for where I am today. Mm.
Now, you had talked to me about the position that you worked for 20 years. You had a mentor. You were um, you were in a position doing exactly what you thought you were meant to do, kind of forever.
Mm.
And that season, you learned some more things. What were some things that you learned? That was a long season, like that you learned there.
Yeah, it was. And I wouldn't describe myself at all as ambitious. And I was one of those teachers who was just happy to be a teacher.
Hmm.
I loved being in the classroom. And my mentor, who was extremely experienced in special ed, and
Hmm.
she probably crusty is probably one of the words you use with her as she got older. Um, she called it as she saw it. Um, but she actually said to me one day, she said, one day I'm going to retire. And she said, and you'd actually be very good at this job. She said, because you're good with people and you're
Hmm.
very organized, and you have this knowledge with the kids.
Yeah.
So, and during this time also, I then did go and get my master's degree as well, which just consolidated everything I'd learnt practically. I then learnt the
Hmm.
theory, and that was very powerful for me. So, so then it just planted that seed. I thought, oh, could I go up
Yeah.
in this role? Um, and so that's eventually what happened. Linda, my mentor,
Hmm.
she took various little bouts of long service, using up her long service before she retired, and that gave me opportunities to take on that role temporarily, which helps to build up your resume.
Hmm.
Um, and so by the time she was ready to retire, I was in that position, and um, the bosses were happy with me being in that position. So then
Hmm.
when the opportunity came to apply for it permanently, it was fairly seamless to go
Right.
through that
Right.
process and get that position as head of department.
Yeah.
And I felt the whole time I was at that school and that I was in the public sector, I felt called to the state sector. I
Yeah.
felt that was where, I knew a lot of Christians who were in the independent sector in Christian schools and saying, why aren't you going to a Christian school? You're a Christian.
Hmm.
Because I feel called to be here. You
Yeah.
know, some there needs to be good Christian people in
Yeah.
that state sector.
Yes,
out.
if all the Christians
Yeah.
are at the Christian school.
Yeah, it doesn't work.
Yeah, it doesn't work. We're supposed to go into all the world. That's
Yeah,
all the world, right?
yeah.
Yeah,
And those
absolutely.
kids needed an advocate. They needed someone
Yeah.
standing up for them and their rights. And often their parents weren't capable of doing that because
Mhm.
they often had their own issues. So
Yeah.
they needed, good people fighting for them and their rights in the
Yeah.
education sector. Mm.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad that you did stay there, and it sounds like that seamless transition sounds like God's favor.
Yes.
You know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was
That's
definitely God's favour.
yeah. That's amazing. Now, at one point, there was a change in some staff. You said it changed the culture at work, and you eventually left. How do you think
Mm.
God was moving on your behalf through all that?
Well, I did feel for quite some time, and it was nearly a 3-year period that I was in the fiery furnace.
Hmm.
So it had been a beautiful staff culture at that school,
Hmm.
and with a change of principal, it became a very toxic place,
Hmm.
and the deputy principals. I try not to be judgmental,
Sure.
but at the same time, when you are working under a very intimidating and bullying person,
Hmm.
people can act in very different ways out of survival.
Hmm.
And, and there's lots of people who will, and we see it in playgrounds, side with the bully
That's right.
because that keeps them safe.
Yeah,
And
takes
so,
the pressure
yeah,
off them, right? Yeah.
that's right. So it became a whole school of you didn't know who to trust. You didn't know who to speak to. You didn't know who to speak to openly about a concern because it would get
Mm-hmm.
back and then you'd be hauled up to the office and bollocked about it. And,
Mm.
so it
Wow.
became a very difficult place to work,
Hmm.
indeed. And I remember standing in the car park one day about to go into work, and I just had enough. My cup was full and it was tipping over,
Hmm.
and not in the good sense. And I
Yeah.
just burst into tears. The thought of walking in for one more
Mm.
day just was too much. And I just stood in the car park and I cried before I gathered myself like we do and
Hmm.
put my big girl pants on and went into work.
Right.
Um, and it was that same day that I tipped over and, my heart cried out in the car park, I can't do this anymore, Lord.
Hmm.
That my upline, the deputy that looked after my department, got a promotion.
Mm.
So gone, in the blink of an eye, he was gone. And I was like, and, just, you'd think after all this time, you wouldn't be surprised at what God can do.
Yeah. But we
But,
forget. We
yeah.
forget. He just
And
did
he
like
still surprises
something
us.
amazing, and then we're like, oh, okay. Oh, God can't do that. I don't know what that is that we do that. The whole
Mm,
Bible's full of that.
yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
That the
Yeah.
impossible is possible with
That's
him.
right. Yeah.
And so that was just that first sign of relief.
Hmm.
Um, things didn't get hugely better from there, but they got slightly better.
Hmm.
And I remember, and it was tough, and I felt very frustrated for these little kids. They're not kids; they're teenagers, but to me they're
Hmm.
just children. Um,
Yeah.
who I wanted to do extra things for them. They come to school without their uniform on, and I just
Hmm.
want to go grab a secondhand uniform from the office and put them in it so they can go to class. But no, that's not the rule. They have to
Mm.
go sit in the responsible thinking room for the day. And I just think this is a
Oh,
kid with an intellectual disability or with autism. Why are we doing that to them?
wow.
Why can't we go extra for this young person? And
Hmm.
just continually being told no. Um,
Yeah.
so I remember the day I took my youngest, Grace, to maths tutoring,
Hmm.
and I'm sitting on the couch. She's having tutoring. I'm sitting on the couch, and I was just like, I'm done. I've had enough. so I downloaded the Seek app. So in Australia, Seek is a job search platform. So I put in the search deputy principal. I thought I'm going to go get a deputy principal job somewhere else. And the first job that pops up is deputy principal at Carinity Education Southside. And so I read about this school, this girls' school, and I thought I can do that job. I'm going to apply for that. And so I didn't see any other job that interests me, just that one. So I went home and I did up my CV and I wrote a covering letter with the selection criteria in it, and I sent it in. And, within a week or so, I was called up and asked to come in for an interview. So I went in for an interview and I felt that went really well. I was called back for second round. So I went in for second round interview. That went really well. I was told that I'd hear by the end of the week. And then I heard nothing. And I heard nothing for a couple of weeks. And I'm like, and because you know how you think, right. Maybe it didn't go all right. And so, and I'm just thinking, oh, okay. Anyway, eventually I got a phone call from the principal of the school, and she said, I'm going to come, I'm going to ask you a question a little bit left of centre. She said, I've taken a promotion. She said, and I was just wondering if you would be interested in applying for the principal position.
Wow.
So you could have knocked me over with a feather. So I went home to my husband and I had a complete meltdown.
Right.
Said, I don't know if I can, because I'd already been through 2 rounds. My nerves were shot. I was still struggling to cope with the work situation I was in. And I said, I don't know if I can do this. I don't know if I can get through this. And, and that's the beauty of my husband when, and the beauty of husband and wife relationships. When one isn't coping, the other one picks them up.
That's right.
And he said, yes, of course you can. He said, get me the selection criteria. He said, let's have a look at it. And he sat with me, even though I'm quite capable by myself. He sat with me and we just got through it and put in the application because I had to apply all over again. So it wasn't, to be clear, It wasn't a given that I would get the job.
But she mentioned it.
Yeah, she mentioned it. It was put out. It was advertised. And I don't know how many applicants there were, but there was a number of applicants for that. So I had to go through the whole process again. So I went through, I think, another 2 rounds of interviews and psychometric testing and all of that. And my nerves are absolutely shot by this stage. I'm thinking, Lord. And, at the whole time, my nerves were shot. But at the same time, I just felt like God's got this. Yeah. He's got this. Whatever happens, he's got this. And I just knew that. I knew he just.
It's kind of exciting too, right? Because you had already finally said, okay, I can be beyond a teacher, right? And you're willing to say I can do vice principal, or I think you call it deputy principal.
Deputy,
but God said, okay, are you really ready to do? And it also, I made a note when you were talking, like when the doubt crept in because of the timing, you didn't hear and you didn't hear and you didn't hear. And I think we doubt when things don't happen in the timing we think they should, but God is working and he's going to work it out in his perfect timing. So I think just like, it's funny, like the things that pop in your mind, but I'm thinking about Daniel, right? He prays and God doesn't answer him right away. When he finally gets the answer, the angel says, hey, your prayer was heard. And I was immediately dispatched on your behalf, but I've been fighting the Prince of Persia. I've been fighting the enemy all this time. So sometimes when things don't happen the way that we think, we've got to remember who God is. Like you're saying, I know I can trust God. I know his character and know that he's working and something is happening. And he's giving you this favor again, and he's giving you promotion.
Yeah, and he gave me a promotion to something that I had never wanted for myself. I had always I thought once I was a head of department, I thought, yep, I want to be deputy, and that's where I want my career to finish. I'll retire from a deputy. I never want to be a principal. Who wants that responsibility? Who wants to have to look after all those
Right.
staff and
Right.
be legally responsible for so many things and child protection and that sort of stuff? Who wants that? You'd be mad, you know.
Yeah.
But God said, no, this is what I want for you.
Yeah,
So,
he wants that same beautiful heart, that advocate heart that cares and that worked tirelessly, in the position before with standing up for kids. He wanted that person in the top position, and he's always the one running everything, so
that's
you don't
exactly right.
you don't really have to worry. He's going to help you do what he asks you to do. Yeah.
And I work at his school. That's what this is his school.
Yes.
When I'm struggling, I'm like, this is your school.
Yeah. Yeah.
I remind him, this is your school. What are we going to do about this?
Hey, absolutely. That's what we're supposed to do. I remember a really difficult time in my life where it had nothing to do with me, but because of circumstances, I was left working on my own to care for my family and went from 2 incomes to 1 income. And I remember sitting at my kitchen table with the bills and holding them up one at a time and saying, God, this is your bill, and I'm trusting you to pay it. And I would put it down and I pick up the next one. God, this is your bill, and I'm trusting you to pay it. And it's not that I didn't work. I worked and I worked hard, but it made no sense that I was going to be able to do everything. And somehow he made it work out that I actually did better. He's crazy good at what he does, right? He's got. So,
and that's the words that just kept going through my head was exceedingly abundantly.
Yes.
We just have no idea, and he just wants exceedingly abundantly more for us.
Yeah. There's a little meme going around social media. This picture of Jesus, and he's holding this giant teddy bear behind his back. I don't know if you've seen it in Australia, but in America. And this little girl has this tiny little, she's standing in front of him, and she has this tiny little teddy bear, and he's asking her for it. And she's like, but I love it. And he's like, got this giant one behind his back. And so we don't sometimes understand that when he does ask us to give up something, that he has something more for us.
That's exactly right.
Yeah. So, how long have you been principal now? And would you tell us about this very special school?
So it'll be 5 years in April that I've been at my beautiful little school. So it is a special assistance school, and that is a sector for disengaged young people. So we are the only all-girls school that I am aware of in Queensland. So we're just this tiny little school on 2 suburban blocks, and we have young girls who have anxiety, have been bullied. We have young mums, so we have a daycare centre on site. Wow. Girls with behavioural issues. We have some young people with disabilities as well. So it's a real mix of reasons of why they haven't made it in mainstream education. So we have just seen during COVID, anxiety and mental health issues just go absolutely through the roof. And I'm sure that's everywhere in the world. But we've just had so many disengaged non-attenders, and they're just at home mainly out of anxiety and fearfulness of re-engaging with society.
Wow.
So we only have about 120 girls, and we have lots of levels of support in our school. So we have a real holistic approach. We have a youth worker in every classroom, and they're there for the social and emotional well-being of the young people, teachers. And then we have a wonderful group of women who we call the support team, and they are like senior youth workers. And as part of that, we have 2 First Nations ladies who work as part of that team, because we have 30 to 40% of our young people are First Nations girls.
Mm-hmm.
So who sadly are disproportionately disengaged from school in Australia.
Mm-hmm.
So we get to wrap our arms around these girls, sometimes literally, and just love them. So we feed them breakfast, we feed them lunch. If they can't afford uniforms, we supply their uniforms. We run a holiday program, so those girls that don't get to experience what normal families do on the holidays, and that's go to the movies or go skating or go to the beach, we do those things, and there's no cost for any
That's
of
wonderful.
that.
That's wonderful. Yeah, I love everything about what you're doing, and I think God's just used so many parts of your story. I mean, think about who you're ministering to, right? Look at the age of these girls. You're ministering to girls who, when you were their age, went through a lot of things, and you're bringing healed, restored, redeemed Leann kind of back to places of woundedness, and you're being able to be the advocate and the one who hugs and the one who provides and the one who goes above and beyond for them. That's pretty beautiful.
It is, and it was all his plan, and who can see that?
Exactly.
None of us.
Yeah. I often say that because God is God, he works in these large chunks of time, and we don't. We work in these little days and these little moments. And it's one of the reasons that I journal, because I think you can miss sometimes what God is doing or saying, or how he's trying to encourage you to that next step, or what he's doing in you. And if you go back and you read back through a chunk of time, you'll often see that maybe God was saying the same thing 5 different ways. Maybe once was in scripture, but maybe once was, some stranger in a store, and once wasn't through a song, and one, over and over and over again, he was saying the same thing until we hear it. And I think we miss a lot. And going back to the beginning like this and looking at our stories all the way through, I think that it's a practice we should all do.
Most definitely, and just go back and join the dots, and it's,
yes,
it's like a big dot to dot painting, isn't it? And
it is.
Yeah, just amazing. And I don't journal, but I do a prayer journal. So I find I get very distracted trying to pray at work, being the principal, the phone, the computer, and everything. And so I actually write my prayers out longhand in a journal, because if I get distracted, then I can go back and go, oh, that's what I was saying, and I can just go back to it. But when you read back, it's like, oh, look at all those answered prayers, just over and over and over again. He is just so faithful. He's just so faithful.
Yeah, that sounds like that might be an interesting book, these handwritten prayers, and then go in and talk about how the prayers were answered. That would be really beautiful.
Yeah, it would be.
It would be a nice encouragement. So this is a really big question, not one I asked you before, but one I was wondering while you were speaking. If you could do anything, now I understand, without financial assistance, without anything, right? That you would have all the resources you could have more right now for these girls. What would you do?
Oh, I don't know.
That's fair. Like I said, it's a big question,
It is a big question.
Can I say this? Can I send you, if you can't think of it now, can I just send you away from this interview thinking about that? Because again, like I said, he owns all the cattle on the hill. He has all the resources. He's able to do anything, right? So he has you there. What it like, think about in your heart, like what's a program you wish you could give them?
Yes.
And then,
Because it's hard. It's, because they're all so diverse. What would you do to improve a majority of their outcomes?
mm-hmm.
And that's really hard. And I think a lot of that would be networking to getting them into jobs and that sort of stuff, and finding sympathetic business owners who would be willing to work with us, and probably, because some of these young people are difficult.
Yeah.
And you've got to handle them lovingly, and sometimes with kid gloves, and sometimes firmly, and to know how to get that balance right is not easy for a business owner who is running a business and doesn't always have time for that. So, lots of, my mind just goes in a million different directions. I don't know if I can answer that question.
I think that what you're talking about, maybe helping them to get set into career positions, might be a really cool next thing to be able to do. Having people help them, with their applications, with what maybe their behavior should be, getting them ready to have the outfits and the look that they need to work professionally. Help them get their resumes together, things like that.
Yeah, most definitely. Just that there's sort of that gap between what we do, and we try to do as much of that as we can, but it's actually getting them that experience, I think, in businesses that is possibly the missing step. And we do it piecemeal here and there, but a much larger program would be wonderful, I think.
Well, yeah, I was asking if you had no restrictions and just the finances were available. But here's the thing. So you've told me now something that would be a helpful next piece. And you've also told me now that you sit and you write out a prayer journal. So start asking God, see what he can do. Maybe.
What does he want to do with that?
Yeah, I think that's awesome. And I'll be praying, because I think that'd be really cool if he provided. You never know. I mean, my daughter and my son-in-law are both psychotherapists, and sometimes people will do things pro bono. Maybe you can get certain kinds of counselors in certain areas of the kind of help that they would need, that would be willing, to do some volunteer work. You never know. Or maybe God will provide something else. But the community, it would be really neat if the community could be invested in the girls too, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. And what would that do for their self-esteem,
Yeah, that's right. It would change the trajectory of their life.
It would. And the dynamic of kind of how things are right now. I think that's awesome. You never know what's going to happen when we talk, right?
No, that's right. Never know where it's going to go.
So here's my last question, and I always end every podcast with it, just because it's my favorite question and I like the answer so much. So if you could go back and give your younger self any advice, what would it be?
Just to push through and to trust God, because I really needed to go through those difficult times to be who I am today. But at the same time, to just trust God. I mean, one of my favorite scriptures is Psalm 46, verse 10, be still and know that I am God, and just know that he has your back. He has it all laid out for us. And he wants more for us than we could ever imagine for ourselves.
Yeah.
So just to love him, trust him, try not to test him so much. And just allow him to be my father, and remember that I am a daughter of the King. So
that's really wise advice. And being still actually translates in certain translations as not striving.
Yeah.
I think we think of being still as like not moving, but it's an active waiting. It's an active faith and trusting in his character. It's allowing him to be God.
Yeah.
And so I think that's awesome. And man, I could probably talk to you for a couple more hours, but I know for you it's very late where you are. um, but I really do. I'm so glad that we have gotten to know one another. I really do consider you a friend. I love seeing what's going on. I have just recently started. I've had a couple of guests uh, back on the show, and to kind of see what God is doing now. And so I would love down the line to see if something comes of that last bit we were talking about. It would be really cool to have you back on again and see what God has done. But I'm just so grateful that God has put you in the position He's put you in, the way that you are stewarding all of your experiences and the giftings that He's given you. And it's very encouraging, and I'm glad to know you.
Thank you. I've loved talking with you. It's lovely to engage with another Christian on the other side of the world. It shouldn't boggle my mind, but it does. And I've just loved spending these last couple of hours with you. So thanks, Amanda. It's been wonderful to share God's word and His love and what He can do for each and every one of the people that are listening to this.
Amen. And it boggles my mind too. I think it's so cool. And what comes to mind is, God says where two or three are gathered, that I'm here with you, and we're gathered. We don't have to physically be together because of technology. No. There's so many bad things about technology, but there's so many good things. And and also now that you're part of the podcast family, I've already told you this in person, but I pray for the people who come on. I stay engaged in following them in social media, and I'm always here if there's anything I can do. As the body of Christ, we are meant to link arms and be there for each other. So I'm cheering you on, and again, I'm just really glad to have gotten to know you. And I hope you have for you, it's a great night. For me, it's a great day.
Yeah. Hope that storm doesn't get too bad, all that rain.
Maybe that's why we were kind of clicking out in and out a little bit there.
Yeah.
Well,
all right.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Amanda. I've really loved it. It's great.
Hey, so I just want to thank you so much for spending your time with me. And I want to challenge you to go out today and to just take notice and to stop and really look around and find at least one good thing, one thing to be thankful for. If you do that today, you're going to find so many more things tomorrow without even trying. Because once you start, you begin to see what's always been there. And if you need a refill, you can come join me again for another cup. Make sure to subscribe and have an awesome day and go be grateful.